Hunter Biden's pardon. Just remind us what's happened here.
Well, I think the key thing to know at the start is this is something that Joe Biden said he would not do repeatedly. So the backstory here is that Hunter Biden, the president's son, was convicted earlier this year in two separate cases. One, he was found guilty by a jury of felony charges relating to buying a gun, where he wrote on the application form that he was sober, he was not addicted to drugs, when in fact at the time he was. So he was found guilty by a jury, and he was due to be sentenced next week. The second case related to tax charges. This included tax evasion, failing to file a tax return, amounted to more than £1 million worth of unpaid taxes, which it should be said he has since repaid. In that case, he pleaded guilty himself, and he was again due to be sentenced in the next couple of weeks. So when he was convicted in both of those cases, President Biden was asked, will you consider pardoning your son? And he said no. Repeatedly since then, particularly his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, has been asked, and even after the election, when they knew that Donald Trump would be coming in, does this mean the president will now look at pardoning his son? And she said no. Post-Thanksgiving, which is a major holiday here in the United States, where Biden gathered with his own family up in Massachusetts. So that takes place sort of the Thursday, Friday. The Sunday night here, December 1st, we get a news alert that, in fact, after all, President Biden has decided to pardon his son.
You've written about this, and you've called that decision unforgivable. Why so?
So look, let me preface this by saying, I think as a parent, as a father, you can completely understand his rationale. It's worth understanding the extent to which Donald Trump and the right here are really obsessed with Hunter Biden. You know, this dates back to to Trump's first presidency. This is what got the relationship with Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, into so much trouble, because he wanted Zelensky to investigate Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. And as we all know, one impeachment trial later conditioned the provision of US aid on doing so. So there has been throughout Trump's first term, and since then in the House of Representatives, these efforts to look into Hunter Biden on this. So this is a parallel track, separate from the legitimate legal proceedings that have gone through. There have been committees formed. It's a regular topic of conversation in right-wing media. No evidence has been found. But so with all of that weight around Hunter Biden, with Trump coming back into office here, and then I think the other key detail timing-wise here is that he named on Saturday, so the day before this happened, Kash Patel, arguably one of his most loyal lieutenants, very hardliner, as his nominee to head the FBI. He named Kash Patel on Saturday. On Sunday, Biden issued this pardon for his son, which is not just for the two cases in which he is being convicted, but is a blanket pardon covering the entirety of the last decade. So you can see, very long way round back to your very good question, why this is unforgivable. So as a father, you can see why he would want to spare his son from, yes, facing justice for the charges in which he has been convicted, but also potentially then, being investigated relentlessly over the next 4 years by a very politicized director of the FBI, by a president who has said he is intent on retribution. You can see why he would want to spare his son from this. As a president, however, I think we should be really disappointed in this decision. It is certainly the case that past presidents have issued pardons. We can get into whether they should have the ability to do this or not. Past presidents have pardoned family members. But
Bill Clinton pardoned his brother, is that right?
His half-brother. Roger Clinton. But for previous drug charges, it was an offense related to cocaine, for which he had already served a prison sentence. Similarly, you might say Donald Trump pardoned his son-in-law, Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, on tax-related, who's convicted and served a sentence for tax-related offenses. So he expunged those charges at the end of his first term, and has since nominated him to be ambassador to France. So there's certainly precedent for pardoning family members. The difference in Hunter's case is that, number one, he has yet to serve a sentence. He had yet to even be sentenced. So it is not that he has, gone through the full system, served his sentence, and then his father has decided to give him a clean slate. But also, Biden has premised much of his opposition to Donald Trump on the idea that he was the one who was going to defend democratic norms, who was going to defend the rule of law, who made it this point of principle, and as did, so many high-profile Democratic surrogates did this during the election campaign. It was this point of principle and differentiation between Biden and Trump, where that, look, Biden is not interfering, despite the fact that his son is currently being prosecuted, and he is not considering pardoning him. That is the difference between these two men. One respects the rule of law, the other is brazenly defying it.
So you think he's sort of decided on, if you can't beat them, join them? But one of the things that Biden did say, he said, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion that Hunter was singled out only because he is my son. And that is wrong. Is there any truth in that?
I think there is. You could certainly say he is being held to a higher standard on the first case, that you can say that, lying on an application form to buy a gun. I think if any of us did that, it's very unlikely we would find ourselves facing felony charges. His last name does attract more scrutiny. That being said, there's no question that he committed these crimes. On the tax case, plenty of rich and privileged people have also been found guilty of these offenses, and it's not because of their last name. So I think my frustration, and I think a lot of the frustration around the way that Biden has framed this, is that there is a way to have done this. For instance, after Hunter had been sentenced, once Biden was getting closer to the inauguration, you could absolutely make an argument to say, given the statements of Donald Trump, given the people he plans to install around him, I am moving to protect all of those close to me, and crucially, all of those public servants who Donald Trump and Republicans have said they're going to spend the next 4 years investigating. So people like Jack Smith, the special prosecutor who was until very recently in charge of these cases going forward against Donald Trump, people like Liz Cheney, people like Anthony Fauci, people who there is no suggestion that they have done anything wrong or illegal, but yet are being threatened with retribution once Donald Trump comes to power. I think if you make that argument and you say, I cannot trust these people's future to the incoming president and his top team, and therefore I'm issuing blanket pardons for all of these top tier of people, and that includes Hunter Biden, because of the statements that have been made threatening him. I think that is a persuasive argument. I think saying, maybe he plans to do that in the future, but there's no indication in this statement that that's what is happening here. I think saying, I'm just pardoning my son, and also saying, the statement, there is a self-pitying...
Katie, maybe it just comes down to, it's a dad and it's his son. I think, you've got children, I've got children. I think much as it wouldn't be the right thing to do in terms of the office of the president, if you had the power to stop your child going to prison for something, they haven't killed anyone, you'd do it, wouldn't you? Especially in the circumstance where you've lost 2 other children.
Right. Yeah, Biden is an absolutely tragic figure. And for people who don't know the backstory that you're referring to there, he lost his first wife, his infant daughter, and his 2 surviving sons. Hunter and Beau were badly injured in a car accident when he was a junior senator in the 1970s. He then lost his second son, Beau Biden, to brain cancer in 2015. So Hunter Biden is his only surviving son. He has another daughter from his marriage to Jill Biden. And Hunter Biden has visibly struggled with a serious drug addiction in recent years. So you can absolutely understand the decision as a parent and as a father. And you might argue that is why pardon power for your own family members should not be in the hands of the president. I mean, this is obviously a fictional parallel, which I discussed with my husband, which may feel trivial in these circumstances, but for West Wing fans will know that when President Bartlett's daughter is kidnapped in an earlier series, he hands over the power of the presidency to the Speaker of the House, precisely because he knows that he can't be trusted as a father to make these decisions. And it's important that an objective person is in the presidency at that time. But I think you could still... There was a way to thread that needle. If his statement had been, I, as a father, cannot bear to see my only surviving son go to prison. I fear what he is going to face at the hands of an incoming president. I'm making this a decision as a father, and I think Americans, I appeal to their understanding. I think you can make that case, but he didn't. His statement said that the raw politics has infected the justice system, that there has been an effort to break Hunter, and in doing that, to break Biden. He sort of presents himself and the family as these targets who've been very unfairly persecuted. And I think what is unforgivable about it is then introducing this idea that, in fact, it's the system of justice that has erred here, which does include, as I say, a jury of his peers, a special prosecutor, an independent court process. That's the really dangerous aspect of what has happened here, because he is making the same argument that Donald Trump is making, albeit they're not the same. Donald Trump is accused of much more serious things, but he is saying the system is politicized. I cannot trust the courts and the legal system to be fair.
And that's dangerous for democracy.
So if you are going to, we can absolutely, we might also argue that's why a lot of people wouldn't run for president, to subject their children to that scrutiny. And it's worth saying, Joe Biden knew when he ran for presidency in 2020, then Hunter Biden had already been through this very serious drug addiction. He was on the road to recovery. But, Biden decided to run for the highest office in the land, knowing full well that his son's struggles would come up, and that this would be something that would follow them.
Okay.
So all of which is to say, you can absolutely understand it on a human parent level, but then make the argument in those terms. Don't say this is because the system of justice here has been tarnished and can't be trusted, because I think that's the dangerous reverberation from this, and that's the message that I think we'll go into the next term. Is like, Biden did it. Biden said that the system had been politicized.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. It's completely understandable, but frame it in those terms.